welcome to the third segment of our session. Today I'm being joined by Comrade Gwizai. The third question that I would like to ask you, Comrade, is that do these changes matter? Why did this elite takeover you are mentioning happen?
A very important question. Thank you, Shem. A very important question for the working class of Africa, for the working class of the Global South. Today, across the world, we see a rise as capitalism goes into a deeper and growing crisis. The capitalists globally have failed to address the fundamental contradiction of global capitalism. That is that the capitalists, the rich, monopolize the wealth of the world, of this country, which is created by workers, created by rural farmers, ordinary people. And yet they give very little, like what is happening now in Zimbabwe, where workers have seen their salaries drop from over $400 to less than $80 since the austerity for prosperity war by Mtuli started. Rural farmers, tobacco farmers, have seen their tobacco earnings slashed. So people don't have money to buy and so forth. So anyway, so capitalism faced its biggest crisis in almost a century, in 2008, what is called the Great Recession, because of these fundamental contradictions that the people are too poor to buy the products that are being produced by huge global companies. And also these huge global companies can no longer be contained within national boundaries of small neo-colonial countries like Zimbabwe, South Africa, Argentina, and so forth and so on. Even the big ones like Britain. So capitalism today faces a fundamental contradiction. As a system, it has failed and can only survive and stay alive by savage attacks on the living conditions of workers, rural farmers, ordinary people, by instigating the wars that we see in Syria, in Yemen. Right now, they want to start another war in Venezuela and in Iran. Destruction of the environment. So capitalism has no solution. So it matters because these global and regional local capitalists, if allowed, may then hijack parties and movements of ordinary people and use these movements for exactly the opposite of what the people have risen to fight against. So it is crucial, it's a crucial lesson for the working class to learn. And for me, the crucial lessons to learn and why this happened is one, ideology matters. The ideology matters, a grounded, trained cadreship of the party matters. And then thirdly, a movement of workers, rural farmers, ordinary people, a socialist movement, an anti-capitalist movement can only succeed when it has got full internal democracy. The oxygen for those kind of parties is internal democracy. Why the MDC was lost is one, a weak ideological grounding on part of its key leaders, led by Tsvangirai, in the sense, and two, the fact that there was a failure to build a cadreship, an army to defend the party from the virus that it had carried right from the word go. And thirdly, the party failed to develop full internal democracy, accountable democracy that would have ensured that the aliens, the foreigners, the hijackers who had come to get the party would be identified, exposed, and eliminated. Those are the three fundamental reasons that the working class, the youth of today must learn. And they must learn that in the sense that Tsvangirai was the group of trade union leaders around Tsvangirai, whilst they opposed ISAP, ideologically they were weak. They refused and objected and resisted the logical conclusion that ISAP, neoliberalism, austerity, is a product and manifestation of the system of capitalism in its last days, what Lenin called the last stages of capitalism. A capitalism that has gone haywire and a capitalism that is no longer able to resolve the crisis and contradictions that it builds. And when that happens, it can only survive by these savage attacks on the rights of workers, rural farmers, and the youth. And that is what we call austerity neoliberalism, or ISAP. But people like Tsvangirai, their generation, they rose up when the Soviet Union was collapsing, East Germany, Eastern Europe. They rose up when China was changing under Deng. And for them, they felt that that was an example of socialism, and that socialism did not work. What they did not realize that this was simply a manifestation of what we call state capitalism. That in reality, the Soviet Union was not a socialist state. That socialism had ended in Russia in 1929 when Stalin and his gang took over. And that what we now saw with the end of the 90s was simply the removal and burying of that decayed Stalinist bureaucratism, not real socialism. I mean, if you just want one statistic that shows you that there was no more socialism in Russia by the 30s. 1936, of the 100 or so leaders of the Bolshevik leaders who led the Russian Revolution in October 1917, less than 4 remained. The rest had been exterminated, killed by Stalin, or had died, like Lenin himself. So, people like Tsvangirai were influenced by that. Although I must say there was a radical socialist faction involving people like Matongo, the chairman of the party, Mutsengerere, and others who had things. So the people like Tsvangirai did not accept socialism. And they indeed fought against the ISO, people like against ourselves. They fought against the adoption of socialist symbols. The very color of the MDC today, red, was one that we fought for as socialists, opposed to people like Morgan, who were calling for red, for yellow and green and so forth. And they decisively fought against allowing the growth in the party of an ideological left anti-capitalist movement. I've already said, I became an MP in Highfields against the opposition of Morgan Tsvangirai, but supported by MDC and ZCTU Harare provincial leaders like the former Senator Makuyana, Tendai Jambani, and others. People that we had worked with in the trenches since 1996, in the strikes, the general strikes 1997. I've given you the example of Chamisa himself. There was a resistance to Chamisa becoming the president of the Youth Assembly because of his socialist ISO background. And I could give you many other examples. And simultaneously, Tsvangirai brought into the party the middle class elites that he was with in the National Constitutional Assembly. People like Wolfman Ngube. People like Kotat were brought in. Sivanda brought in Kotat. Kotat had belonged to what was called the Forum Party, led by Dumbuchena, the former Chief Justice. In fact, if you read Kotat's own autobiography, he says, I was surprised when Gibson Sivanda came to me and told me that I was going to be appointed in the interim executive of the party as Secretary of Legal Affairs. Kotat says he was surprised because the law firm that he came from, he says he had been for over 100 years, the law firm for the National Railways of Zimbabwe, where Gibson Sivanda came. But, so the mistake by people like Tsvangirai Sivanda was a naive belief that these middle-class elites, intelligentsia, that were in civic society, would bring in funds, would bring in skills that were not there, and the fight of these people then became a fight of turning this party into a party that would ultimately be a party that would answer the interests of bosses, white farmers, the West, and so forth. That is why when we were expelled, when I was expelled in 2002, 2003, part of the charges were that I was attacking Bush, I was attacking Blair, who were seen as friends of the party. When Tsvangirai had threatened that we have a massive demonstrations against Mugabe by end of December 2001, it was people like Kotat who fought and organized to say, no, let us not go that route, but rather let us use lobbying and advocacy in the West there's going to be a new positive government led by Bush and Blair, and they will impose sanctions on Zimbabwe and will get the change what they want. So these people knew that if we had gone back to the method that built the MDC of general strikes, stayaways, as in 97, 98, the party was going to radicalize further. So they fought that. And unfortunately, they succeeded. So lack of ideology. Then secondly, there was capture of the trade union leaders who were leading the MDC. The fundamental mistake that was made is that the ZCTU literally formed this party. Its leaders then became the leaders of the party. But there was no mechanism of ensuring that these leaders who came from the union movement remained accountable to the unions that had produced them, to the workers who had built them up. So they went in as individuals, and the trade union movement no longer had control over them. Yet what should have happened is that, and that is what we fought for, unfortunately we lost. The trade unions should have, the trade union movement is the one that must have had a majority quota of the leaders of the party in the main wing, in the women's movement, as well as in the youth movement. And you would also have a small minority quota for the radical student movement. And at most, you have a tiny, tiny little portion for the middle class friends of Tsvangirai and Sivanda. And the unions should have continued being, bringing that party to account. And also making sure that the people that it had deployed into this party would remain accountable to the unions, give report backs, ensure that you are able to move forward. You see, it happened initially the first 2 years. That is why the MDC was able to push for the Labour Amendment Act number 17 of 2002. I sat in the Portfolio Committee of Labour together with other trade unionists like Paulina Mpariwa, Makwembere from Gweru, Milton Gwetu from Bulawayo. And together we fought, supported by the party and the unions. We fought for the creation of the Labour Act of 2002, the most radical, pro-worker labour statute in the history of this country. But that's what we needed to build on. But we did not build on that because we allowed. Now, once your trade union is going into the party without this accountability as individuals, and you expect them to compete against these middle-class elites, business people like Mudzuri, business people like Ian Makoni, lawyers like your Kotas, your Pitis, your Welshman Nuves, they stand no chance. Eventually, they end up, as the election movement built up, the rich, the middle classes were able to use their money to buy votes and to buy power and influence in the party. And then the tragic thing is that with the movement away of these leaders, Tsvangirai, the union movement itself failed to continue building a cadreship of young trade unionists who would be schooled and trained in a working class ideology against the system of capitalism as the fundamental enemy of working people in Zimbabwe, in Zambia, in South Africa, across the world. Because that is the fundamental problem. The system of capitalism is the fundamental devil, is the fundamental evil, is the fundamental cause of poverty, misery, and kutambura kune vanhu kwose kwatinoona. And unless you take away the factories, the banks, the farms, you take away the means of production, the main resources from the capitalists who control these things, they will continue to be in charge of society, and they will use that wealth to buy power and influence in political parties that are formed by workers. So that is the second thing. So one of the main things that the working class has to learn today is that without a continuous ideological training of its membership, of its activists and its leaders, they will not be able to stand up against the middle class elites. The middle class elites are the ones who are sent by your billionaires like your Masiwas. They are sent by your millionaires like Moxon of Mikus, your Billy Rottenbosch. Those are their tools, their instruments. They are the ones who are sent by the imperialist NGOs. They are sent by the imperialist governments with bags of money, to bribe ordinary people, as you saw at the MDC Congress, where youth and other ordinary people were bought with beer. I mean, Chamisa himself complained about it. Then the final reason, comrade, is that the middle class elites, what they then did, they are aware that when you have real internal democracy in a party, as well as in a trade union movement, they are exposed, they will soon be found out, and working class leaders who betray, who become traitors to the cause of the working class, are also thrown out, and they are dealt with viciously and ruthlessly. So one of the key things that was done by the middle class elites in MDC, with the support of reactionary trade union leaders, was to kill internal democracy in the MDC. And they built a personality cult around Morgan Tsvangirai. The party became Morgan Tsvangirai, including the name of the party. It became MDCT. Tsvangirai became the face of the party, as if he was the one who had built the party alone, and not the hundreds and thousands, the millions of workers and peasants who had built the party from the struggles of 96-97. But they were very clever. They captured the key leaders of the party, including Tsvangirai himself, provided them finances and funding, and ensured that internal democracy in the party was stifled, neutralized, killed. And Tsvangirai, in the end, became an autocratic leader of the party, in the sense that that is why he could then say, I make these decisions and no one challenges them. But in reality, you don't make the decisions alone. You would have a kitchen party, you would have a team of advisors drawn from the middle class elites. So what that then did, comrade, is that eventually it meant that you could not bring to account these elite hijackers of the party. You could not expose them because they were protected massively by the umbrella of Tsvangirai. He himself saw it too late in 2005. Walsh Mengcuwe led a split from the party. You saw Tendai Biti led a split from the party after 2013 because these people do not have faith, do not believe that the working class can lead the party, can lead ordinary people. So without internal democracy, without the self-activity of the rank and file and ordinary members of the MDC, of any workers' party, or of any revolutionary party. I mean, we've seen with the Socialist Revolutionary Workers' Party in South Africa in the elections. Unless you have this internal democracy which unleashes the energy, the power, the enthusiasm, and the knowledge of ordinary members of the party, then you allow elites to take over. And I conclude then saying those are subjective factors. Objectively, unfortunately, after 2003 until about 2016, class struggles in the country went down massively in terms of strikes, in terms of demonstrations. Generally, the working class had been felt tired and exhausted after the defeats of 2002, 2003, and massive poverty and misery. So what then happened is that there was a serious decline in social struggles and class conflicts. And when that happens, comrade, the scum in the working class, the scum of society rises up to the top. When you have a radicalizing movement, when you have strikes, demonstrations, that is when you get the best of the working class. That is when you get the best of our youth, our students, our activists. As we had seen in 97, 98, 99. But when struggles went down, it meant that these champions of working class struggle, these champions of struggles against oppression, against neoliberalism, austerity capitalism are marginalized. And the people who rise up to the top are the elites. So it was the fall and decline in class struggles that combined with the lack of internal democracy in the MDC, combined with a naive faith in the middle classes, a naive faith in an ideology of human rights as opposed to an ideology of anti-capitalism, an ideology of socialism that has produced what happened this weekend.